had, because he's a king, right? So he's like a judge too at that time. Two ladies, I think there were two prostitutes, came to him, and they were fighting over a baby. Apparently one died, and the other one is still alive, and one of them accused the other one of stealing their baby because they rolled over the baby in their sleep. This is like a really difficult situation. And he was very clever. And what is it he said? Does any of the children remember? No, you're too old. Any of the children remember? What did Solomon say?
Like a pizza.
Okay, all right, she counts. So he came up with the idea, I'm going to threaten to kill this child. I'm going to give orders to kill this child. She knows that the real mom is going to speak up and say, I'd rather not have the child if it means this child is going to die. So he said, that's the real mom. So that's like a really clever, kingly way of coming up with ways to get to the truth. When you get to Ecclesiastes, it's talking a lot more about those kind of things in life. When you're faced with situations that don't have an easy answer as to why they're happening. So this is addressed to believers, not to non-Christians, or to believers back then. They didn't know about Christ, but they did in faith, knew that something was coming. So that's what the book of Ecclesiastes is about. It's actually a book of we'd call it philosophy today. And it starts off, and he says right in the beginning that he made it a point to really study this issue. What does life mean? What does life mean? And he starts off, and he goes through several sections, and at the end he comes to a pretty wonderful conclusion. So, we're only going to read one passage in Ecclesiastes. But before we do that, what are some famous sayings or passages that you may have heard from the book of Ecclesiastes? It's been made into popular songs too. And so we want to tell the others who haven't grown up in that generation?
Oh, sorry. There's a time and a purpose for everything.
Yeah. It's been made in more than one song has been made off of that. So what is that normally, when people normally sing that, in what context is that?
This too shall pass.
This too shall pass.
Yeah. What you're going through right now, there will be another season.
Yeah.
The season that follows.
Yeah, and it's very poetic. So Ecclesiastes is full of poetry. In fact, one of the parts of Ecclesiastes is he said he wrote it, and the Proverbs is the same way, but he wrote it in a way that was very mysterious, riddle-like, so you could think about it. So it was meant not to have an easy answer, but for you to think about it. So it's kind of that's why I call it a book of philosophy. So, all right, anybody else know of any other sayings or passages that come from Ecclesiastes that you remember hearing? I don't know if it actually says this too shall pass.
That's Shakespeare, I think. Oh, okay.
Well, it does say everything shall have an end. Will have an end.
Yeah.
And it also says everything will start over. Now, that sounds very cyclical too, doesn't it? Everything goes to the ocean and then it starts over. And then when you think you have a new idea, you realize somebody else had it. It actually says that.
There's nothing new
Nothing new under
under the sun.
the sun. Under the sun. Okay. So, by the way, what's the opposite of under the sun? Over the sun. Who's over the sun? God. So there's a different perspective. But he's saying from man's perspective, let's go through all the things that we observe, that are true, that are observable, and then how do we reconcile that? Okay, anybody else? Come on, you guys have to have something you've heard from Ecclesiastes, or you think you might know or heard.
There's a season for everything.
Yes, it's actually that was made into a song. Many songs like that. All right, Vanity of Vanities, you've heard of that, right? Renee, you going to say something?
Yeah, I'm trying to say. I see the verse here.
Yeah, you can say it.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think how you would say that. The common way of saying naked from birth.
Oh, naked from
Let me
life.
put it here because I was trying to.
Yeah, I was thinking as I came in, and isn't that Job too?
Could be.
Yeah.
Job. Okay, go ahead.
This one says, as he came from his mother's womb, naked shall he return. To go as he came, he shall take nothing with him. Actually, it's just that first part, so.
You can't take it with you.
You can't take it with you. Yeah, actually, that's a good one. That's very ecclesiastic-like. You can't take it with you.
Yeah, I've heard it before, like, apparently the vanity of vanity means all is vanity instead of phrase from
Yes.
ecclesiastic. We used a lot when we were in college after midterm.
Really?
Yeah.
This is what a regular secular college,
No,
a Christian college?
no, I was just from our friends talking.
Just friends talking. Where did they get it from? Where did they say they got it from? Where did they say they got that expression? Where did they hear it? Did they say?
Failing our exams.
No, I know, but where did they hear it from? Were they reading their Bibles and they said that?
I think so.
Oh, okay. So maybe these were Christians then?
Like, I have no idea where is it came
Yeah.
from, but it has a means of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're actually going to talk about vanities. Every translation note that I have seen down in the bottom actually tells you vanity is not the right translation. And do you know why? Why? Well, it may be meant in Old English, I don't know, but it's not really the right word to use in modern English.
Has different meaning.
Yeah, so what does vanity normally mean in day-to-day use?
Vanity means like full of yourself.
Right.
Things nowadays.
Full of yourself, useless, vain, it's related to vain.
Empty. Yeah. And like empty, or without meaning.
Without
So, like,
meaning.
taking God's name in vain is related to that term.
A piece of furniture that you sit in front of to put.
It's bad. It's morally bad.
Right.
It's morally bad. You want to say, hey, somebody's vain.
Well,
Or
no,
your
vain-
work-
in vain, like
in
taking
vain,
God's
in
name
vain.
So without
Yeah.
purpose.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Ah.
Because that would be a difference. How come those two words are so close to each other?
It's like buckle and buckle. One is breaking, one is putting it together around your pants.
That's right. You thought about this.
They're called contronyms.
Oh, really? Is that what they're called? Contronyms? Okay, thank you.
Overlook is one.
All right. So the commentary was making, and by the way, and I've noticed this, I have a New American Standard. These don't have notes, but every translation I've seen actually will say, well, it could actually be translated this way. And that seems to be the correct translation. So it's actually more related, referring to the life of Christ. The same word is used, that he appeared as a mist, as a vapor, and then was gone. So it doesn't mean necessarily that it is a bad thing, but it does mean that it's very ephemeral, if you like that word. It's very misty. It's very like smoke. It's here and it's gone tomorrow. So that's why it has sometimes such a negative connotation, because people will be involved in work or doing things, and what they did is then not appreciated or it's forgotten. And so it's like a mist that comes and goes. And that's why people associate that with depression or darkness. But later on, in other situations, is also associated with beauty or being temporary. So it depends how you look at things, which is why it's a book of philosophy. It helps you say, let's take a look at this life, not of vanity. And so the word they use is hebel. I hope I'm saying that right. It means misty, vaporous. So it's more, in fact, in the same translation later on, they say there's a futility of futilities, which is actually closer. It's more the idea that it's temporary, not necessarily bad. But it can. But obviously, if things are temporary and no one remembers you, it feels bad. Okay, depends what your perspective is on that. So it's a little bit more misty. So, all right. So I have Ecclesiastes for ease of build-up. So Ecclesiastes is not meant normally to be read like you would Proverbs. You can jump anywhere in Proverbs except for the beginning part when it's telling you why they wrote Proverbs. But you can jump anywhere in Proverbs, and what do you get? A proverb, right? So you can say, a bird in hand is worth two. How's that go? Two in the bush, right? So what does that mean, by the way? What? That's the point of a proverb.
Something that you have now
Yeah.
It's worth more than something you could possibly get in the future.
Yes.
You know?
How about nothing gained? No, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That means like nothing, you didn't risk anything, but you didn't.
So it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, it's the opposite of the other Proverbs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So Ecclesiastes is basically saying, hey, let's join both of those truths together. And what do we get? We get the book of Ecclesiastes. So it's like a deeper level. It's like the next level up of Proverbs. Okay. So the first.
Proverbs does that too. It'll say,
Yep.
answer it fool according to his folly, and then it'll say, don't answer
Right.
it fool.
You have to think about it.
Right, when you do it.
Yeah. Okay, so Ecclesiastes is like next level Proverbs. Okay, so it's meant to be read in a progression. So it lays it down. It's like, oh, by the way, wisdom is important. Being smart is important. And then later on it says, oh, by the way, even if you're smart, it might still fall apart. Oh, and by the way, and so it builds up, it builds up, it builds up. It wants you to feel that tension. So the first part tells you why Solomon wrote this book in the first place. It tells you what was his mission in being able to write this book. And he is basically saying, I want to explain to you the meaning of life at a big level, right? And then that's from chapter 1 through chapter 2. So it doesn't fall, it kind of falls in the middle of it. Then in the second part, so I have this in 4 parts. So in the second part, he starts off saying that basically mankind, people, have a need to know why they exist, why they are doing the things that they are doing in the big picture point of view. And he tells us that actually God put that into them, that they can't escape that. So they have a need to know, which is why he's writing the book in the first place, right? So you're thinking sometimes, if some of you are old enough, you're thinking, if I could just not think about this, I'd be happy as to why this thing did or didn't work. And you don't have an answer. Like if Job could just be, hey, this thing happened to me like a dog. I have no idea why I have boils in my kids up, but it doesn't bother me. I can totally be above it all. He couldn't be above it all. It bothered him. And Solomon says, that's right. It should bother you, but I'm going to give you a secret later on about this botherness. He says, this is why, first of all, he says, I'm going to tell you why, the meaning of life. And then in the second part from chapter 3 to about chapter 5, he explains that part of this reason is because we have this need to know who we are in this universe. Like, what is the meaning of our existence? And we also need to figure out, we have a desire to know how to be wise in particular context and particular situations. So that's, Sam, that's when we're talking about nothing venture, nothing gain. Bird in hand's worth two. It's like, how do you know? So this is important to discuss that. And he's confirming that your desire to know is actually a God-given desire. Okay, everybody has that. And he acknowledges that there are difficult situations in life that are not easy to answer. Job, for example, which we are told in the end, but Job didn't know that in the beginning. Why am I suffering? He's asking, what's the meaning of suffering in the universe? That's a big question that God actually puts into him, but he doesn't get an answer, which is what Solomon talks about. God doesn't give us an answer always. And I should mention, one of the big themes that he has is that he talks about we have a need to know, but God also is telling us that he's not going to tell us the full reason. That's actually part of his plan. He is not going to tell us the full reason. He'll tell us sometimes some of the reasons, but not the full reason. And he's also not going to take away the fact that we need to still be wise at the Proverbs level in what we do. Okay, this is important, but yet there's still mysteries. In the third part, chapters 6 through 8, you don't have to memorize this, but it's just to show you the progression. He starts saying that there are different levels of being able to live at. And I like this commentator I was reading. There's good, there's better, and there's best. Now, that's a modern way of saying that. So he's acknowledging that some people seem to have a pretty good life. Like their jobs come easy to them, the wealth that they're getting, but then sometimes there's still something lacking, like they're still not happy with what they have. Or there's some people who have that, but there's still something missing. So he talks about there's differences in the level of way people feel about life. So it's not just like, okay, you have one answer and you're all good to go. It's not like that. It's much more complicated. And in the fourth part, he gives the conclusion. He's actually giving you hints as he's going along. And in the fourth part, chapters 9 through 12, he gives you the conclusion and he kind of flips it on its head. Okay, and I'm thinking, so have you ever seen, and I can't think of a movie right now, but I've seen dozens of them, a movie and the person, the hero of the movie, or turns out he's a hero in the end, but you're not sure about that, is told he's going to die pretty soon. Maybe he's got some kind of terminal cancer, he's going to die in 5 months. Or there's something else going on. And typically, what does the movie do about that? Unless it's a French movie, then it's dark. But if it's an American movie, what is normally going to be the theme of that movie?
Family.
Why? Well, in that case.
In that case, because it's important. It's an important value, and like you don't split up family.
Okay, but the guy's dying. You got a terminal
I
cancer.
feel like what usually happens is the first part of the movie is going to be about him doing insane bucket list items, and then the second half of it is going to be him depressed and then realizing what's really important.
Okay. What, did I see a hand back there?
Oh, generally he like does a bunch of stuff that he would not normally do because he thinks that he's done.
What stuff does he typically do?
Like save the world or something. Like in a superhero movie.
Yeah, he risks it all. He risks it all, which is usually a variation on that. And family might be one of the reasons. Maybe something else besides family. Or he's going to do something heroic. He knows he's dying, so he'll sacrifice himself to be the guy who's going to deliver the toxic virus, but he'll be, he'll die doing it, or he lets go and down the channel. There's been done so many variations. And actually, in an interesting way, that is very much the conclusion that Ecclesiastes has. But he says because there's an ultimate reason behind this. So what we're going to do is read chapter 11. And there's another famous saying that some of you have heard. How many people have you heard the expression, cast your bread upon the water? You have heard that. And in what context would people normally say that, or would you hear that? You never heard of it?
It's kind of weird because bread dissolves in water,
Yeah?
but it's this idea of what is it? Letting things like sending out and then reaping again.
And in what context?
Because you'll probably lose it.
Is that the? I don't know if it's.
Say it again.
Is it that willingness to let things go that you value? Because it could, even if it's destroyed, kind of like bread in water, it'll eventually come back to you. You have to be willing to sacrifice it.
You'll catch a fish that ate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually another expression that is not at all a Christian word, but it's actually correct in its sentiment. It just doesn't have a reason behind it. What does that mean? You'll get karma.
All right, it'll come back to you.
It'll come back to you. But what is that? What do they mean exactly? When people say that, what do they mean?
Kind of a take it.
What's that?
You'll get what you deserve.
Right, good or bad, right? But it also means that it's a little bit iffy. You don't know when. It won't be a straight line back to you, right? Well, actually, that's what Ecclesiastes kind of implies, okay? And this is for godly people. All right, who will read chapter 11? It's pretty short. Who will read chapter 11 for me? Yeah? With a bold voice.
Bold voice.
Bold.
Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a serving to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil will be on the earth. The clouds are full of rain. They empty themselves upon the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it shall lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. As you do not know what is the way of the wind, or how the bones grow in the womb, or in the womb of her who is with child, so you do not know the works of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and in the evening do not withhold your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, either this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Truly, the light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to behold the sun. But if a man lives many years and rejoices in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. All that is coming is vanity.
Or we would, better translation, all that is coming is
Fleeting.
fleeting. That's actually a beautiful word.
Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart, and in the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these God will bring you into judgment. Therefore, remove sorrow from your heart, and put away evil from your flesh. For childhood and youth are vanity.
Better translation?
Fleeting.
Are fleeting.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's another passage in there that Renee and I like a lot, but it's talking about the same thing. Put away depression, put away, and double down. Double down on being happy. Double down on being able to do what you know needs to be done, either for pleasure or because you want to build something or do something. This is always in the context. So we're not going to spend too much time on that tonight, but Ecclesiastes is really clear that you need to be obeying God, but within the context of obeying God, you have a lot of freedom to do things. And what it's saying here in chapter 11 on that one too, they say it's obviously an expression of the time, but not only that, it says Solomon was known for having really gone into massive international trade. He had boats. There's a whole passage about him sending out boats, and they come back. So it's the idea that in business, there's the idea of business here actually. You invest in businesses, you invest in trade, you invest in opportunities. You could apply it to whatever situation you're in. Mrs. Orr, of course, is investing in a different place. Not all of them pan out, as she's told us. And the conclusion is that you don't know necessarily. You have to put the work in. There's a whole thing about that too. You have, if you want to grow a vegetable garden, you have to plant. You do have to do that, right? What's that other expression in English? If you plan to not
Count your chickens before they hatch?
don't. No, that's a different one. But it's like if you don't prepare, know that you've already planned to fail, something like that, right? Okay, it's the same idea.
Failure to plan is planning to fail.
Yes, failure to plan is planning to fail. So he says you need to plan, but just be aware that your plans may not come to fruition. So his conclusion is that since you don't know for sure, and you're still young, and you still got vim and vigor in you, then double down on what you want to do. Of course, and it goes on to say, just remember that God will bring into judgment the evil, the things if you don't do right. But otherwise, he has already approved the things you have done. Now, that's a famous verse for me and Renee. We like that. Does anybody remember know where that is in Ecclesiastes? I think it's in Ecclesiastes 9, and I didn't write that down. It's like God has already approved the work that you have done. It's an echo to the conclusion that he's having. Or is it 8?
9:7.
9:7?
Want me to read it?
Yep.
Go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already accepted your works.
Keep going. Go all the way down to 9. Oh, 9 and 10, yeah.
Yeah, let your garments always be white, and let your head lack no oil. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life.
Okay, wait. So instead of vain,
life,
fleeting life. Yeah, fleeting life.
Fleeting life, which he has given you under the sun. All your days of fleeting.
Yeah, fleeting time.
For that is your portion in life, and in the labor which you perform under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going.
Okay, you can stop. You can stop there. So his conclusion, and he goes on to say, is that we don't know, he makes a big deal, is that sometimes people are successful in obvious things that they do or people that they're with, and other people are not. But he says you can't conclude from that God is mad or happy. That's not enough information to know. So what's the only way to know that God is happy with you and that you matter in the bigger scheme of things? And that what you do, let's say you try something, you try to put on a play and it fails. Does that mean that God is mad at you? Does that mean that God is mad at you? No, it doesn't. You know that. Does it mean he's happy with you? Not necessarily. Can you explain that?
Well, it depends on your motive, and it depends on your relationship with Christ, and are you growing as a result of it?
That's exactly the answer he gives. So the work for a non-believer is very depressing, because if they believe there is no life after death, or it doesn't matter, all the things that they did, even the good things that they did, won't count. In fact, that's why some people get very depressed. You'll know famous people, they've done amazing things, and at the end of their lives, some of them become so depressed, not because they did necessarily bad things, they actually did some interesting things. They think that it's pointless and meaningless. But as a believer, he reveals to us, and you have to read it on your own to see because it's kind of mysterious. He reveals to us that even the things that we did that didn't come about, if you did them with praise and thanksgiving to God, he remembers that, right? And you will be judged. How does he judge? He judges positively for our good works and not our bad works. And why? And what's the ultimate reason we can have that confidence? Because of Christ. So we're operating at a different level. So but you still have to be doing things. So so if you're a young person and you know that maybe 5 out of the 10 things that you try, assuming they're not trying to rob someone, but you're trying to do something positive, and it's genuine, 5 of them out of the 10 are going to fail. Is the Christian answer to say, oh my goodness, I better not try? No, and that goes back to the parable of the talents, right? Where he says, well, I didn't want to try anything because it was risky. We're finding out God doesn't care so much about it. He's aware of the risk. And he's also not necessarily going to tell you what's going to work and fail. But what does he want you to do? To double down on doing good while it goes on, the chapter 12 says, like, since you know you're going to die and you're going to get old, you better get busy because you only have so much time. And what you do, even if it doesn't work out, God will remember. Isn't that wonderful? So that's why it starts off, and it basically starts off like a movie. People are dying everywhere, and at the end of the movie, it comes around full blast. Somebody says, I get the meaning of life. In that case, it might be more narrow. It'll say, it's like, I'd have to love my family. So then they're going to go back and visit their estranged son. They're going to go do bungee jumping. They're going to do the things that they've always wanted to, but they were too afraid. But now that they know they're going to die, that's what Ecclesiastes, since you know you're going to die, instead of getting depressed, you better start putting the party on. You better start dressing well. You know you're going to die, so go for it. And that brings us to the end of Ecclesiastes. Any questions anybody has? So many. Well, that's good. And it's telling us, and they won't be answered all on this side of heaven.
Yeah, the last 2 verses of Ecclesiastes are...
What does it say?
To fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. The conclusion of the matter. God's.
Right. It's I see this as especially for people in the Western, it's an anti-depression book.
Yeah.
Because this really only happens to people who think a lot. And in the West, we have a lot of time to think, which is why I think people are leaders and are intelligent people. If they don't believe in God, they tend to get depressed because they think about it a lot. So sometimes I say it's just better to be poor, and you're so busy just trying to eat, you don't have the time to think about the big.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it.
I think it's interesting because it sort of speaks that there's eventually going to be an end of your wisdom, and then you'll be regenerate, and you'll have a greater wisdom and a fuller knowledge, and that's something that you can look forward to now, which kind of helps you to be content with what you've been given, and you're limited in knowledge now, and knowing that at some point it's going to become perfected. You just got to have patience.
Right.
And while you have limited knowledge, do what you can with that what's been given.
Right, because it does actually matter. In fact, I'm just thinking right now, I thought of it until right now, it's like the widow's mite, right? He's actually saying that what that person is doing, God sees and does, and actually does matter in some huge cosmic sense, apart from just the actual amount of money. That is like, wow. But it's his conclusion is saying, don't sit down and give up on life because things might not work out. He's like, the conclusion is to start, turning on the music, getting dressed, eating, drinking wine, and go do your thing.
Eat, pray, and love.
Eat, pray, and love. Very good.
End of the thing.
Which is another movie, right?
Pray first.
So. Does the back row have something to say back there? What, Morton, since you grew up in France, what's the typical French attitude about the meaning of life?
About the meaning of life? Life is meaningless, so it's a no.
So what do they typically mean by that when they say it's meaningless? Like a typical French person, if he's very intelligent and not a Christian, what does that mean to him?
It means that no matter what you do, by the end of your life, well, at the end of your life, you're dead, so what was the point anyways?
Right. Yeah. It's very European in general. They have a lot of time to think. And without God, they start going down some dark alleys, which he says those dark alleys are kind of partly true if you take God out of the equation. But if you bring God in the equation, it flips it around, and then you can become more risky for good things, not less. All right. Would you like to close us in prayer, please? Yes.
Sure, let's pray. Lord God, thank you for the book of Ecclesiastes, and thank you for the rest of your word. And I pray that you would guide us and protect us and help us to love you well and love others well. And thank you for giving us this life. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yes.
Thank you.
It helped to have a big clock in the back.